I'm a 30-year-old guy, and this story starts with a birthday. Not a dramatic one, not a huge fight or a meltdown, just silence. That's what made it unforgettable. Growing up, our house wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel either. It was just practical. My parents weren't the kind of people who said I love you out loud. They believed in structure, discipline, and not making a fuss over things. We lived in a two-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy but stable. Until I turned 11, my birthdays were small but still a thing. My mom would bake a cake from a box, and we'd have dinner as a family. Sometimes I got a toy car, or a board game, or even a new jacket if it lined up with what I needed anyway. My dad usually just nodded and said, "Happy birthday, champ," then went back to reading the newspaper. It wasn't warm and fuzzy, but it was something. I didn't think to expect more. When I was 11, I started getting into skateboarding. Not seriously, I was still bad at it, but I liked watching older kids skate at the park. I circled a few models in the Sears catalog and left it open on the kitchen table a few times, just in case someone was looking for ideas. That year, things felt off around the house. My dad had lost his job in the spring and was home all the time, but in a heavy, quiet kind of way. He spent most of his days watching the news or pacing. My mom was picking up extra shifts at the hospital and always looked exhausted. No one fought, but the house felt tight, like everyone was holding their breath. A week before my 12th birthday, I was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when my mom put down a grocery bag and casually said, "You know you're too old for presents now, right?" My dad, without looking up from the TV, added, "Yeah, it's time you stopped expecting stuff like that. You're not a little kid anymore." I thought they were joking. I laughed, kind of awkwardly, and said, "Okay," but no one laughed with me. My mom just went back to unpacking the groceries. I figured maybe they were messing with me. Maybe they were planning a surprise. Or maybe they were just having a bad day. On the morning of my birthday, I didn't expect balloons or a party. I just expected something, a card, maybe, or a cupcake. Instead, I got up, got dressed, and walked into a kitchen that looked like every other morning. My dad was drinking coffee and scrolling through job listings. My mom was already gone for work. No one said a word about the date. At school, a girl in my class gave me a folded piece of construction paper with a smiley face on the front. It said, "Happy birthday," inside with a piece of gum taped in. Another kid shared some of their Skittles with me and said, "Hey, I heard it's your birthday." Cool. That was more than I got at home. I ate lunch in the bathroom. Not because I had no one to sit with. I did, but because I didn't want to tear up at the table. I didn't want to explain why I was sad. I didn't even understand it myself. After school, I walked home slow. I checked the porch just in case something was there. Nothing. Inside, the house was quiet. My dad was asleep on the couch. Dinner was leftovers. My mom came home late and didn't mention the date at all. At some point during dinner, my dad looked at me and said, "You're a man now. Men don't need gifts to feel special." That line stuck in my head more than anything else. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. After that, birthdays became a non-event. My younger brother was 9 at the time. He still got gifts. That same year, he got a brand new gaming console with 2 controllers and a stack of games. My parents clapped when he opened it. My brother asked me once why I didn't get anything for my birthday, and I just shrugged. He was a kid. I didn't want to ruin his happiness. But the older I got, the more I noticed the difference. When I turned 13, nothing. 14, same. By the time I was 16, it wasn't even a surprise anymore. I stopped mentioning it. At 19, I moved out. I didn't fight with them. I just packed up my stuff and left for college. No big goodbyes, no tearful farewells. That was just how we were. For a long time, I didn't talk about that birthday. It felt small compared to what other people went through. But recently, I've been in therapy. I started digging through old memories and realized how much that one moment changed the way I looked at myself. I used to think maybe I was too quiet, or not fun enough, that maybe I really didn't deserve the same things other kids got. But now I'm starting to ask better questions. Not why didn't they give me gifts, but why did they stop seeing me as someone who mattered? What I've found since then has been surprising. And the more I dig, the more I realize that birthday wasn't just a fluke. It was the start of something bigger, something I didn't understand at 12, but I do now. A few months into therapy, the 12th birthday came up. It wasn't planned. I was talking about something else, family dynamics, I think, and it just slipped out. That day, the silence, the way no one even looked at me differently. My therapist asked if I'd ever talked to my family about it. I hadn't, not once, not when it happened, not after. I just tucked it away and tried not to think about it for the last 18 years. A few weeks later, I was having dinner with my parents and younger brother, just the 4 of us. It was a quiet evening, the kind where nobody says much unless something's wrong. My dad had retired a few years back. My mom still picked up occasional nursing shifts, but mostly stayed home. My brother, 28 now, had just flown in from out of state for a visit. We'd ordered takeout, sat at the same kitchen table I'd grown up around, and halfway through dinner I decided to bring it up. I asked if they remembered my 12th birthday. My dad laughed like I was bringing up an old sports story. He called it a rite of passage, said every boy goes through that moment when childhood ends and you toughen up. He mentioned that his own father did the same thing. No gifts, no celebrations after a certain age. My mom didn't laugh, but she didn't look surprised either. She said it had been a rough year, that money was tight and things slipped through the cracks. My brother looked down at his plate and didn't say much at first. Then he said he'd always wondered about that. He was 9 when it happened and remembered being confused. One year we both got cakes and balloons, and then suddenly it was just him. He said he thought maybe I didn't like birthdays or asked them to stop. I hadn't. I told them I wasn't upset about not getting a present. It wasn't about the skateboard or the lack of a cake. It was about feeling invisible. That's the part they didn't seem to get. My dad waved it off, said it was ancient history. That stuff builds character. My mom gave a long sigh and said she didn't think I'd remember any of it. That line landed weird. Like I was supposed to forget whole pieces of my life because they were inconvenient. I didn't finish my food. I left before dessert. No one stopped me. That night, I texted my brother. I asked if our parents had ever told him he was too old for presents. He replied a few minutes later, said no, he got gifts until he moved out. Then he asked why I was bringing this up now. I just left it on read. At my next therapy session, I went through it piece by piece. My dad's reaction, my mom's explanation, my brother's confusion. My therapist pointed out something that hadn't clicked until then. What they told me was a universal rule clearly wasn't. It was just for me. I went digging through old stuff at home after that. There were boxes of family photo albums in my closet, half dusty, half torn. The pattern was obvious once I started looking. Birthday pictures of my brother at 10, 11, 12, even 17. Balloons, hats, presents. For me, they stopped cold after age 11. Not a single candle, not a single card. I flipped through each album just to be sure. Nothing. Then, I remembered an old spiral notebook I used to write in. It had a red plastic cover with a half-torn sticker on the front. I found it tucked in the back of a drawer. There were stories, drawings, and random thoughts. One entry was dated the day of my 12th birthday. It wasn't long, just a few lines. Maybe they forgot, or maybe they just don't like me that much. It didn't read like a dramatic sentence. Just a kid trying to understand something that didn't make sense. Still needing answers, I called my aunt. She's my mom's older sister. We hadn't talked in a while, but she picked up right away. I asked her if she remembered anything unusual about the year I turned 12. There was a long pause. Then she said something that stuck. She said my mom used to call me the mature one. That I didn't need things like my brother did. That I was different. She never liked hearing that. Said it sounded like an excuse. Like my mom had already decided I could handle being ignored. I didn't argue with her. I just said thanks and hung up. That night, I looked back at the notebook again. I hadn't thought about that kid in a long time. The one who asked small questions and got smaller answers. Now it's different. I'm not looking for someone to say sorry. I just want the full story. And I think I'm finally starting to get it. After that call with my aunt, something shifted. I couldn't stop thinking about the way she said it. How my mom used to call me the mature one, like that meant I didn't need anything. I started digging through more of my childhood stuff. There were old school report cards stacked in a plastic folder, birthday cards from neighbors and extended family, and a few photo albums I hadn't touched in years. The pattern was even clearer this time. My brother had photos from every birthday, balloons, cakes, shaped like cartoon characters, themed decorations. At age 15, there was a picture of him holding a new gaming headset with wrapping paper still on the floor. At 17, a photo of him blowing out candles at a barbecue with a dozen friends around him. Me? Nothing after 11. Just school portraits, soccer team photos, and one blurry shot of me in a hoodie on a random Tuesday. No captions, no dates, no birthday photos. A few days later, we had another dinner at my parents' place. It wasn't planned around anything. My brother was in town a little longer, and we'd all agreed to meet up again. Halfway through dinner, I brought it up. Not angrily. I just asked if they ever noticed that my birthdays disappeared from the photos. The room got quiet. My dad leaned back in his chair and said I was overthinking things. Not everything is a slight. He said if he had to dig into every old moment that didn't go perfectly, he'd never get anything done. My mom said again that those years were tight, financially. Then she added something else, that they thought I'd understand, because I always did. My brother didn't look at either of them. He just stared at his drink. Then he spoke up and said he remembered how weird it felt when the birthdays kept happening for him, but not for me. Said he felt uncomfortable sometimes blowing out candles while I just sat there at the table. I explained I wasn't trying to start a fight. I was in therapy. I was trying to understand the way I grew up and how it shaped the way I see myself, that it wasn't about presents. It was about disappearing, and how that started with them. My dad pushed his plate away and stood up, said it sounded like I was rewriting history just to feel like a victim. Then he walked out of the room. My mom stayed. She didn't say much for a while. Then she said she honestly thought I didn't mind, that I was always quiet about things, that I didn't ask for much. I told her I didn't speak up because I thought it would make me more of a problem, that maybe if I didn't complain, things would settle down. My brother apologized right then, not in a big dramatic way, just quietly, said he should have noticed, said he was sorry he didn't. Later that week I brought it up with my therapist. She told me something I hadn't thought about before, that I didn't need to wait for anyone to give me permission to celebrate my own life. That maybe it was time to build new traditions, instead of chasing old ones. So I did. I planned a birthday dinner. Nothing big, just 6 people. My brother flew in again. A few close friends came. We booked a small private room at a casual restaurant and ordered way too much food. I didn't want gifts. I just wanted it to feel like a real birthday for once. Something with laughter. Something that didn't feel like I had to earn it. My grandmother couldn't come in person, but she mailed me a handwritten card and an old photo of me at 5, covered in frosting and smiling like an idiot. I put it on the table beside the cake. My parents weren't invited. I didn't make a show of it. I just left them out of the plans. A week later, my mom found out about the dinner from my brother's social media and called. She didn't sound hurt. She sounded offended, like she'd been left out of something she was owed. She asked why she hadn't been invited. I told her the truth, that I didn't feel emotionally safe around her, that I wasn't looking to create a fake moment just to make her feel better. She started listing all the things she'd done over the years. The sacrifices, the long work hours, the bills. I didn't argue. I told her I wasn't looking for guilt. I was looking for honesty, and I'd never gotten that from her. She didn't say much after that, just said she didn't know what else I wanted from her. I told her I didn't want anything now. Before she hung up, I said something that had been sitting in my head for days. I said, "Now you understand what it felt like, for 7 years straight." Then I ended the call. And that was it. The birthday dinner ended up being better than I expected. We were just 6 people in a small rented room at a local bistro, nothing flashy. There was a string of lights overhead, mismatched plates, and a custom cake my friend ordered with "about time" written in icing. My younger brother flew in again and sat right next to me. We talked, we laughed, we shared stories I hadn't thought about in years. For the first time in a long while, the day felt like it actually belonged to me. After dessert, while we were still sitting around with coffee and leftovers, my brother brought something up. He remembered overhearing our mom on the phone when we were kids. He was around 10 at the time. She was talking to a relative and said I was too serious and hard to connect with. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but hearing it now, it hit different. It explained more than I expected. That line had probably followed me around without me knowing. I didn't cry a lot. I was quiet. I liked to read. I didn't throw tantrums or make a scene. Somewhere along the way, they decided that meant I didn't need much. Or maybe it was easier for them to believe that. One of my friends at the table, someone I've known since college, asked if I still talked to my grandmother. She remembered meeting her once years ago, then never again. That got me thinking. My grandmother had been around when I was little, family dinners, Christmas cards, birthday calls, but she vanished around the same time my birthdays did. The next day, I found her number in an old address book. I wasn't even sure it would still work, but when I called, she picked up on the second ring. Her voice was a little thinner than I remembered, but still warm. I told her who it was and asked if she wanted to meet. She said yes without hesitation. We met at a small cafe just off Main Street. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table by the window with a book in her lap. When she saw me, she smiled like no time had passed. We ordered coffee, sat down, and talked for nearly 2 hours. She explained a lot. After I turned 12, she said she kept trying to bring birthday gifts, but my parents told her not to. They said I was too old, too mature for that kind of thing, that I didn't need surprises or toys anymore. They said they didn't want her encouraging unrealistic expectations. She tried to argue, more than once, but every time she brought it up, it turned into a fight. Eventually, she stopped coming around, not because she didn't care, but because it felt like there was no space left for her. Before we left, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. It was a little beat up and wrapped in yellowed tissue paper. Inside was a metal keychain, just a simple skateboard-shaped charm with my initials on it. She bought it for my 12th birthday. She said she never got to give it to me, so she just kept it all these years. I didn't know what to say. I thanked her and held on to it the whole walk back to the car. That night, I called my brother and told him everything. He didn't say much at first, then admitted he had no idea our parents had shut other people out too. He always thought they were just distant in their own way, not actively pushing people away. It changed the way he saw it all. I started writing things down after that. Not just events, but scraps of conversations, moments that used to feel blurry. There were things I thought I misremembered, but now they made more sense. Little things, like how I stopped getting invited to family get-togethers while my brother still went. How neighbors who used to bring over birthday cards for both of us slowly stopped mentioning mine altogether. My grandmother began calling me every few days after that coffee meetup. Sometimes just to check in, sometimes to share a story I hadn't heard before. She told me about a time I fell asleep in her lap watching cartoons, about how I used to help her fold laundry and talk about dinosaurs. Small things, but they filled in gaps I didn't know I still had. It became clear that what happened to me wasn't just forgetfulness. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a series of choices people made. They looked at me and decided I didn't need care, that I was fine on my own, that I could take it. They were wrong. But now, I'm finally starting to see the full picture, and the boy who didn't get a birthday at 12, he deserved more than silence. The weekly calls with my grandmother became a regular thing, usually Sunday afternoons. She'd tell me little stories about the old neighborhood, about how I used to line up my toys in straight rows, about how she once caught me trying to microwave a marshmallow just to see what would happen. Her voice never rushed. She remembered everything, even the small stuff. One afternoon, in the middle of telling me a story about a summer trip we never took because my dad refused to go, she stopped for a second. Then she told me she almost called child services once. Not because of bruises or yelling, there was none of that, but because she'd never seen a house feel so emotionally shut down. She said it was like living in a room where no one looked at each other for too long, but she worried if she called, it would just land on me, that whatever came next would make it worse. I brought that up in therapy the following week. My therapist didn't act surprised. She said something I didn't expect though, that being called independent too early isn't a compliment. It's usually an excuse. Something adults say when they've decided you won't need anything from them. That clicked hard. That word, independent, had followed me around since I was a kid. Teachers used it, family used it, even neighbors. I never thought to question it. But now, it made everything line up in a way that felt different. Being quiet, being self-managed, doing my homework without reminders, it had all been misread as proof I didn't need care, so they didn't offer it. A few days after that session, I called my brother again. I asked him if he remembered any signs of favoritism when we were kids. He hesitated for a moment, then said he remembered our dad calling him the golden kid once when they were tossing a football outside, not in a deep way, just as a joke. But that phrase never came up around me, ever. I decided to reach out to one of our old neighbors. She lived 2 doors down and used to babysit both of us sometimes. I found her number through a mutual friend and gave her a call. She still remembered us right away. We caught up briefly, and then I asked if she remembered anything from around the time I turned 12. She did. She told me she once brought over a birthday gift for me that year, a small Lego set, and my parents turned her away at the door. They told her we didn't do birthdays anymore. She left the gift anyway, but wasn't sure if I ever got it. I didn't. That moment hit hard. It wasn't just about what my parents didn't do. It was about what they made sure no one else did either. It wasn't forgetting. It was closing a door and locking it behind them. After that, I started writing everything down. Not just the memories, but the feelings that came with them. I kept a notebook with dates, quotes, pieces of conversations. One memory stood out. I was 15, home with the flu, and pretty out of it. My mom was scheduled to work a double that day. Instead of calling out, she made my younger brother stay home from school to take care of me. I remember hearing her tell him to make sure I drank water and didn't sleep too long. She left without saying much to me. At the time, I didn't think about it too deeply, but now it landed different. Even when I needed care, it got handed off like a chore. Then came the email. It showed up on a Tuesday evening. The subject line was "Let it go." I opened it and read through a long wall of text. My dad had written paragraphs about how I was digging up old ghosts, playing victim, and letting therapy warp my memories. He said everyone's childhood has some bad parts, that I should stop trying to assign blame just because things weren't perfect. There wasn't a single question, not one moment of asking how I was or why I felt the need to bring all this up now. I didn't reply. I forwarded the email to my therapist, then opened my phone, blocked his number and deleted the email thread. I didn't announce it to anyone. I just did it, quiet and final. That weekend, I told my brother and grandmother. Neither of them asked me to reconsider. No one said I should try again. My grandmother just asked what I was planning for the next Sunday call, and my brother said he'd be around if I needed anything. And just like that, the door that was always half shut finally closed. This time on my terms. A few months after cutting off contact with my father, my therapist suggested something simple but clear: build around what's working, not what's missing. She encouraged me to create new spaces, not to fill old gaps, but to reflect who I've actually become, not the version my parents decided I was. So I threw a second celebration. I called it the Belated Birthday Bash and made it open invite to a mix of friends, coworkers, and neighbors I'd grown closer with over the last year. Nothing formal, just good food, a rented backyard space, music, and a loose excuse to gather without awkward family tension hovering over everything. My brother came early to help set up. He handled decorations and I took care of drinks and food trays. My grandmother arrived carrying a small photo frame wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a picture of me at maybe 6 years old, grinning in front of a homemade chocolate cake with blue frosting. One of the last birthday photos anyone had of me looking that happy. She placed it on the edge of the snack table. No big speech, just a quiet nod. As the night picked up, conversations drifted from work gossip to childhood stories. A few guests eventually noticed my parents weren't there. One neighbor asked directly if they couldn't make it. I answered honestly, they weren't invited. I didn't give a speech or ask for pity. I just explained that I didn't feel safe around people who still refused to take responsibility for how they'd treated me. A few people nodded and shared their own versions. One friend talked about a sibling who got everything growing up while she became the built-in babysitter. Another mentioned a mother who only called when she needed help with bills. It wasn't heavy or dramatic. No one turned it into a therapy circle. Just quick moments of understanding that made everything feel lighter, like we all had our own version of silence to crawl out from. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice wasn't soft or curious. It was clipped. She'd heard about the party through someone else and wanted to know why she hadn't been invited. No confusion, just accusation. I told her the truth, but I didn't feel emotionally safe around her. That I wasn't interested in pretending we were fine just to keep the peace. She didn't take it well. She launched into a list of things she'd sacrificed for me. Shifts she picked up, sleep she lost, vacations she never took. I didn't argue. I just said I wasn't asking for guilt. I was asking for honesty, something she'd never given me. She asked to meet in person. I told her I'd meet for coffee, but only if she really planned to listen. Not defend, not redirect, just listen. We met at a small coffee shop downtown. She showed up 12 minutes late and waved off the delay like it didn't matter. From the moment she sat down, the focus stayed on her. She talked about how hard those years were, how tired she always was, how no one appreciated what she gave up. She mentioned me in passing, but never once asked what it had been like on my end. After 20 minutes, I finally cut in. I laid it all out. The 12th birthday, the missing celebrations, the gift my grandmother had tried to bring but was told not to, the neighbors who were turned away, the sick days where my younger brother was made to care for me. Every detail I'd spent the last few months uncovering, I gave her clearly, without raising my voice. She sat still for a moment, then instead of apologizing, she said the same line I'd heard before. I didn't think you needed much from me. That was it. No shock. No remorse. Just the same old script. I told her calmly that she never bothered to ask what I needed. She just made that decision for me, like a judgment she passed early on and never reviewed. She didn't say much after that. She picked at her napkin, glanced around the cafe, and eventually said she hoped things got better for me. I stood up, paid for my own drink, and walked out. Later that week in therapy, I went over the whole thing, from the call to the coffee shop, to the final sentence she gave me. My therapist asked how I felt about it. I didn't answer with some big emotional speech. I just said, she didn't listen. But I spoke, and that's enough for now. And we moved on. After the coffee meeting with my mother, I went back home and started laying everything out. Not to send or share, but just to see it clearly. I opened a blank document and began listing key moments from childhood through now, dates, places, people, and all the small turning points I used to wave off like they didn't matter. It turned into a personal timeline. No commentary, just facts. The things that actually happened. My therapist suggested I write an unsent letter too. Something honest, not polished. Just everything I'd never had space to say when I was growing up. I wrote it late one night, 4 pages long. I talked about birthdays, yes, but also the day they left me at soccer practice for an hour because they forgot the schedule. I brought up the times my report cards got ignored, how my friends' parents knew more about my interests than my own did. I ended it by saying I never wanted perfection. I just wanted to be noticed. While sorting through old memories for the timeline, one specific moment kept circling back. On my 16th birthday, nothing happened. That wasn't new, but a few days later, my younger brother got gifted a tablet. Not for school, not for a holiday. Just because I remembered watching him open it at the kitchen table while I ate leftover pasta. No one looked at me. No one said anything about the date. I asked him about it on a call. He remembered, said he thought about it afterward. Thought it was weird. Thought maybe I didn't want to celebrate anymore. Then he admitted he should have said something. I told him it wasn't his job to correct things our parents created. He offered to talk to them on my behalf, but I turned it down. It wasn't his responsibility to carry. Around that time, I got a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She'd heard bits and pieces about everything from our grandmother, and wanted to talk. We got on a video call the next day. She told me she always felt like the emotional one in her family. Her mother, my aunt, used to call her too sensitive. Same way mine called me too serious. She remembered visiting our house once and leaving early because it felt strange. She said it didn't feel like a home, just a place with people in it. She also mentioned that our grandmother had gotten into an argument with my mother years ago about how I was being treated. She didn't know the details, just that it ended with my grandmother not coming around as often. It didn't surprise me at that point, but hearing it from someone else added another layer. Later that week, I went to my grandmother's place to return a book she had lent me. While I was there, she brought out a small box from the top of her closet. It was full of old photos, birthday cards, and notes she'd kept over the years. In the stack was a letter she once wrote to my mother. It wasn't harsh or dramatic, just honest. She wrote about how distant the house had become, how she worried I wasn't being treated with the same care as my brother, how silence wasn't the same as peace. I read it twice. Then I folded it and put it back in the envelope. That night, I wrote one final message to my mother. No insults, no arguments, just a boundary. I told her that unless she could take real accountability, I would be stepping away indefinitely. I didn't ask her to change. I didn't ask her to explain. I just said I was done trying to force something that had never been offered freely. Her reply came within the hour. Just one sentence. I did the best I could. No apology. No reflection. No mention of anything I'd shared. I stared at it for a minute, then deleted the message. After that, I removed her contact entirely. No more phone number, no more email, no more access. I didn't make a speech about it to anyone. I just let my brother and grandmother know what I'd done. They both understood. Neither of them asked me to undo it. And just like that, the chapter closed, not out of anger but out of clarity. After cutting contact with my mother, I brought it up in therapy. My therapist didn't frame it as some dramatic goodbye. She said something I kept in mind for the rest of that week. Drawing a boundary isn't cruelty, it's survival. It's choosing peace where none was offered before. I didn't need to fight anymore. I just needed to stop handing out invitations to people who kept showing up empty-handed. My brother saw everything unfold. He knew about the letter, the reply, the coffee shop meeting. A few days after I told him I'd blocked her, he called me. Not to argue but to tell me he was stepping back too. Not out of anger, but clarity. He said he couldn't keep playing neutral when it was clear who had always been expected to hold the silence. He wasn't interested in being part of that anymore. We started building new traditions, not to make up for the past, but to build something that belonged to us now. That summer, we decided to throw a half-birthday celebration. No real reason for the date. We just picked a weekend that worked and called it a new tradition. We invited our grandmother, our cousin, and a handful of close friends. No decorations with our names on them, no family photo boards, just music, grilled food, and a table where no one had to perform. Our grandmother brought lemon bars. Our cousin made everyone laugh with a story about our uncle trying to fix a dishwasher with duct tape. It wasn't about nostalgia, it was just about now. The kind of simple, solid joy we didn't get enough of growing up. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, I went out to the backyard with a shoebox. I hadn't told anyone about it. I dug a small hole near the edge of the garden and placed the box inside. It had 4 things: the keychain from my 12th birthday that never got delivered, the letter my grandmother wrote to my mother years ago, a photo from the last birthday I remember being celebrated, and the unsent letter I wrote to my parents. I covered it with dirt, smoothed it down, and walked away. No speech, no big gesture, just something private. Something that felt like a full stop on a sentence I never got to finish. A few days later, I was cleaning out an old cabinet when I found a cassette player. I wasn't even sure it worked, but when I popped in a tape labeled SFX plus me, it whirred to life. The voice that played was mine, maybe 8 or 9 years old, doing sound effects, telling fake news stories, making robot noises. I listened all the way through. At the end, there was a skit where I pretended to host a game show. I gave myself the winning prize, a banana. I laughed out loud. Then I sat still for a while, letting that kid's voice echo through the room. I didn't feel broken, I just recognized how much he'd carried without help. A few days later at work, a coworker mentioned their son was turning 12 soon, and asked if I had any recommendations for a beginner-friendly skateboard. Something clicked. I went to a local shop on my lunch break and picked out a board with a cool design, plus a card. I didn't write anything long, just happy birthday. Keep rolling forward. That act, as small as it was, made everything feel lighter. Not because it fixed anything, but because I got to decide how the story keeps going. At my next therapy session, my therapist asked if I felt like I was healed. I didn't say yes. I said I felt real, and that was more than I used to. After that, I started working on a side project. Just a small idea, organizing birthday celebrations for kids who might otherwise be overlooked. Not a big charity, not a formal group, just quiet gestures. A cake here, a card there, making the day matter in a way it should. It's not a redemption arc. I'm not trying to rewrite my own story through someone else. But it's something rooted in action, not waiting for someone else to change. Something that says, this mattered to me, so I'll make it matter for someone else. And that's where I decided to begin. It's been a full year since I first sat down in therapy and brought up the birthday I turned 12. I didn't plan to remember the exact date when it came around again, but I did. I marked it quietly: coffee, a walk around the block, a journal open on my desk. No candles, no flashbacks, just space, enough to notice the time that had passed. One morning, not long after, I found a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten envelope. My mother's name in the top left corner. Inside were 2 pages filled with stories from my childhood. How I used to sing along to commercials. How I liked my sandwiches cut into triangles. Little things she remembered, but not the thing that mattered. There wasn't a single line about what she missed. No mention of silence or absence or the years she chose not to show up. I read it once. Then I placed it in the back of a drawer with the rest of the things I didn't need to carry around anymore. Instead of letting it drag me backward, I focused forward. My brother and I had talked about doing something simple for our birthdays. Nothing big, just a dinner that didn't come with pressure or pretending. We picked a place downtown with long tables and warm lighting, invited only people we trusted. Our cousin came, our grandmother showed up with a small wrapped gift, and one of our friends brought a homemade playlist. Before we sat down to eat, our grandmother handed me a frame. Inside was a photo from when I was 11. I was sitting at a kitchen table with a crooked party hat and a smear of frosting across my cheek. I didn't even remember the photo being taken, but there it was, a clear frozen second from one of the last birthdays that still looked like joy. I placed the frame on the shelf above my desk when I got home. Not to mourn what followed, but to remind myself it wasn't all empty. A week later, our community project launched. My cousin helped with the paperwork and logistics. We started small, one neighborhood, a handful of volunteers, a budget just big enough to cover cards, cupcakes, and a few decorations. The goal wasn't to fix anything, just to celebrate kids who might otherwise be overlooked. At our first event, there was a boy turning 12. He showed up with his aunt, barely said a word at first. We handed him a card, a small wrapped box, and a cupcake with a candle already lit. His eyes lit up before he even touched the frosting. When he hugged me on his way out, he didn't say anything. He just held on for a second longer than expected. That was more than enough. That night, I opened my journal and wrote one sentence. I never got the 12th birthday I wanted, but I helped someone else get theirs. That's enough for me. I stopped trying to chase closure after that. It stopped being about finishing a chapter or fixing anyone. It just became about not dragging things that didn't want to move. Some stories don't have neat endings. They just shift. You learn to carry them differently. On my next birthday, I didn't plan anything big, but my friends did. I walked into my apartment after work and found a cake waiting on the table. It was simple: chocolate frosting, rainbow sprinkles, and a single line across the top in icing, to the boy who deserved better. I laughed first. Then I sat down and let the silence fill the room in a different way. Not cold, not empty, just quiet. Like the moment was finally safe to hold. I didn't blow out the candle right away. I looked around the room and saw my brother smiling from the couch, my cousin pulling out paper plates, a friend queuing up a song on her phone. No performances, no tension, just people who had decided to show up and keep showing up. That night, after everyone left, I sat by the framed photo of my 11-year-old self and didn't feel like I had to choose between him and who I am now. For the first time, it felt like we were in the same room. Both of us allowed to stay. I don't need permission to celebrate myself anymore. I never did. I just needed to realize the absence wasn't my fault. And so, I'll end this the way I started, with a birthday. Not the one I lost, but the one I gave. The one that landed in the hands of a quiet kid with a shy smile who left with frosting on his chin. They stopped giving me presents when I turned 12. This year, I gave one to someone else, and that's how I'll keep going.